Anyway, in 1994, I was doing some work for a couple of firms where they had large amounts of data that they were storing, and it dawned on me that basically they were storing the same words over and over repeatedly, sometimes millions of times, and it really didn't seem that efficient. So I came up with this thing called the language model, which was a change in the way complexity works. We shifted the complexity to the SQL Server programmers and really made the SQL Server engine work to provide the joins and unions and retrieve the data.
Yes.
And basically it was just a different way of looking at words, and one thing led to another, and I started thinking about words in a different way, especially once the internet really took off in the late 80s, early 90s, and I started seeing how language was playing out in these various fora. And it got to an idea where I was thinking, well, and about that time we were also starting to get all the hype about Greenspan is, the uber god of finance.
Yes.
The stock market's starting to roll up and all this sort of thing. This is pre-97, actually, 95 or 96. I had this idea that the thing to do was to examine, basically, it was a target, a goal, it was to examine how language was expressing itself relative to that particular subject, which was money and all of its flavors, stock market, etc.
Sure.
One thing led to another. I wrote some software that basically associates the emotionality of words with, if you will, prescient leaks from everyone. The concept is that everybody's psychic, whether they admit it to themselves or not, whether they're aware of it at any given instant or not, and that it alters that psychicness and its prescient visions about the near future, alter the choice of words that these individuals make in their everyday conversations as they're expressed on the internet. So basically you've got, you're working a technical job, you've got 20,000 words you really use in any given week because you're always talking about the same kind of subject.
Yes.
But occasionally you'll step outside of that 20,000 words and use something from the other 100,000 words you may know internally and express, basically the same thought about a common subject. You just choose to use a different set of words for some reason. And it's that some reason that fascinated me, because I thought it was the, if you will, the bleeding edge of psychic impression.
Yes.
It was why you would choose, this word over that word for ordinary conversation about baking bread or growing corn or something, tuning engines, whatever.
Right.
Anyway, and it turns out that was indeed the case, that if you followed the shift in the language from these ordinary conversations over time and collected the words that were here this week that didn't show last week, and also highlight those words that had dropped off from last week to this week, that kind of a deal, and you do it on the order of millions upon tens of millions, then you can get in sort of a fuzzy idea about what's going to sort of head towards us expressed in the language at an archetype level, because the words have a tendency to cluster themselves almost naturally, it seems, in these broad archetypes of, family, work, wealth, finance, country, diplomacy, those kind of things.
Right. I'm incredibly aware of an atmosphere of a person. Whenever, like what you said here, whenever you start using different words to describe something that you had before, you can usually tell that when something's wrong with somebody. So some of the staff members here are very good at kind of keeping their personal life at home and just going about their business at work and getting very professional. But I can tell there's little things that they do that just resonate with me, and I can tell something else is going on. And it drives people crazy, because I'll stop and be like, what's wrong? They're like, nothing. I'm just like, that's not true. What's wrong? And I'm like, why do you do that? How do you do this to us? And it's just the atmosphere of the person. So if it's if you're cataloging this in a language way, millions of people, you get some very interesting results.
Yes, we'll actually end up with about 60 million to about 80 million reads, that is to say, captures of language change that pass our processing, although we might read 120 million and throw out 30 or 40 million for various different reasons.
Right, indeed. Going back to just before the housing market crash, because it deals with the finance, did you see something in the data that basically, in a sense, led you to believe that there was going to be a problem in that sector? Or
oh, certainly.
Yes?
Actually, about 2 years before we had any real major breakthrough, so to speak, we judge our results, by the way, is we're not really getting forecast to a certain extent. We're not getting forecast of the event so much as we are getting a forecast of the language that will be used after the event and discussing it.
Right.
And so it's kind of like, as somebody from the future holding up a big blurry newspaper, and we have to real quick write down what we see, that kind of thing.
Yes.
And you don't really get any pictures with it, so it becomes rather tedious.
Yes.
About 2 years out from the crack, if you will, of the subprime into the major media, we started becoming very much aware that we were within that process had begun.
Yes. Yes. I know that on our New Year's Eve broadcast, one of the things that you and I discussed was how things were going to look getting closer to the next New Year, and that things were definitely going to get worse before they got better. And sure enough, obviously, they've gotten worse. But that's not so hard. That wasn't so hard to predict. It was the areas that was so accurate that was very interesting, with the banks, with the job losses, with the supposed recovery of the economy being presented in the media, and all of this extremely accurate, and we're not even done with this year yet.
Yeah.
So
it becomes a little bit frustrating to me, because it's like, well, the data is saying this, maybe we can all stop it or change it. But it looks like some things are so cyclical and so large that we're fleas hanging onto the end of that dog as he tumbles down the hill.
Yes, absolutely. That was one of the things we discussed not too long ago. Me and another guest is, this is happening. Is there really a feasible way to stop it? I don't believe so. I think that, like you said, we just got to hang on and at least know it's coming to prepare personally, right?
Correct. I believe so, yes.
Yes. There's a whole host of things that I'd like to get to tonight. Now, your data, we always give you enough time to see how your past data has been, how accurate some of the things that we've touched on turn out to be, and give you enough time to compile some data. I'm so curious to know, how's the data looking right now?
Well, it looks like we need lots of pies and lots of it's going to get, again, a lot worse from many people's perspective before we get any kind of light at the end of the tunnel, in a sense of the word better, or even less chaotic.
Yes.
We're going to go through some very interesting times here.
Indeed.
It depends on what area. They're all going to be interrelated. That's the real problem, is that everything's going to hit at once.
Yes.
And at once is there going to be a narrow little focus that we all have to get through for probably 2 years, 2.5 years.
Yes. I've been told to really keep an eye on what's coming up here, which is the fiscal year, because that's when all the secrets kind of come out of what's going on behind the scenes, and that's whenever it's going to really get bumpy. Do you agree with that?
I agree with that as well. There's other issues relative to how the banking community has to do business, central bank to central bank, that will also coincidentally occur at that period of time that will put further stress on the banking structure.
Yes.
But we have to acknowledge that the current fiscal paper debt, dollar-based, especially including the derivatives, infrastructure for our planet is itself bankrupt, and it is non-repairable.
Yes.
And so it's kind of very much a question of a very large thing is going to collapse, and we have to decide where we're going to be individually while it occurs.
Right. Right, exactly. All right, we're close to the top of the hour. I got to take my quick break. All right, of course, like I said, Cliff is my guest tonight. Let's get Cliff back in here with me. Cliff, welcome back.
Thank you very much.
Now, I wanted to ask you, did you watch? Did you keep close tabs on what was going on at the G20 by chance?
Yeah, I haven't watched any video from it or anything, but I do get feeds from various different information sources. I read them as text in my Vortex program.
Yes. And did you find it quite interesting of what was kind of agreed upon with the whole economic agreement to regulate and put companies under these strict guidelines? And basically, from what I'm understanding, they said that they've created a global economic regulation platform, in a sense. Is that what...
It's a good understanding of it, yeah. It's a framework, as they usually describe it in these things, from which other specific policies can be implemented.
Yes.
And in that sense, one can think of it at an even broader level as a reform movement beginning very much like the tacking of the 20 demands or whatever it was by Martin Luther on the church door. It's a reform movement of a very entrenched, ingrained religion.
Yes.
And it's going to run into a certain amount of opposition.